Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Great to have you with us. My name is Rick Adams from practicalcsm.com, and I'm joined today with Peter.
I'm Peter Armaly. Hi, everybody. I'm Senior Director of Customer Success Enablement at Oracle.
He certainly is. So today is our last in our series for this year on customer success strategy. So if you've we've had two, this is our third, I should say. If you've attended all three, well done and congratulations, and you've made it through to the bitter end. However, bad news is we're going to be doing more of them. So do please stick around. Make sure that you get, register at practicalcsm.com, for example, so we can keep you in touch in the newsletter. We are going to have a little meeting, Peter and I, next week, I think, to decide what the topic titles are. By the way, if there's a topic you would like us to tackle, feel free in the chat window here or via email or LinkedIn or whatever to propose a topic. We'd be really interested to know what you would like us to cover. That'd be really interesting, wouldn't it, Peter? Yeah,
very much so. And I think what we want to do here, Rick, with these podcasts is just to offer kind of an authentic, kind of unscripted experience for the audience. We have a topic.
It will be that.
We don't rehearse these things. So Rick and I have known each other for a little bit of time. And I think we know enough about each other's background and our experiences that we feel like we'd have a good conversation about these things. So.
Yeah, I think we've got enough of a meeting of minds and enough of differences of opinion to make it an interesting conversation, at least for us, if not for you. So without further ado, our topic for conversation for this week is what should the customer success function do? Which I think is a pretty profound question that we should all be really clear on, really. I mean, our companies are funding these activities. It costs money. That money is a finite resource. It could have been invested in something else: marketing, more salespeople, training for the salespeople, a million different things, right? Research. It wasn't. It was invested in customer success. The company needs an ROI on that. So we've got to be really clear what we do and why we're doing it. And I think that's really the purposes we want to clarify that. So the format, if you haven't been with us before, is we're going to have a 30-minute conversation, which leaves us then with around 15 minutes at the end for questions. And we very much welcome all of your questions. Feel free. Of course, we can't promise we're going to have sensible answers. We'll do our best. But you will see on the tool here, there is a chat facility. Feel free anytime you like, whilst you're thinking of it, to type in those questions. We won't pick them up till the end. So we're going to do 30 minutes of conversation. Then we will pick up the questions. You can wait and ask us the questions at the end, or you can type them in advance. That's absolutely fine. And I'm going to be closing the poll in just a moment. So if you haven't completed the poll, please just tell us where in the world you are, so I can see the majority of people, North America. The next is Northern Europe, and one or two in Southern Europe as well. So hello, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for that. Let's end the poll then, and I think we can kick off with the conversation. So let's have a look. So what should the customer success function do? And I think that we can't really answer that unless we're clear about the purpose of customer success management. So Peter, your opinion. Give me a definition.
Sure. The way I think of this is it's easy to envision answering this question, because if you've ever had this conversation with family and friends, I think we've all had this. If you're in customer success, you're probably more frequently than not asked, what exactly do you guys do? I was just asked this the other day. And so it's a good test, right? To try and answer it in a succinct way. And I like generally the language that people use in our profession. I'll call it profession, which is to say, ultimately, we're trying to drive successful business outcomes for our customers. And those things are specific, desired business outcomes that are measurable. And so our practice is meant to put in place the right kind of mechanisms, tools, and processes driven by people that move the customer towards those goals, to achieving those goals, so that they're satisfied with their investment enough to the extent that they are happy to renew. the financial arrangement. That's kind of how I answer that question, even with family and friends who have no idea what high tech is. They seem to understand that not much about business.
Well, I good point. Who does? Not enough people understand enough about business, in my opinion, actually, Peter, which is a whole sort of topic or rant in and of itself.
I saw that rant you did on that one, actually.
But I tell you what I think is that I think that we've got to be clear on not just on what customer success management is, but actually what customer success is.
Yes.
So to me, it is pretty much, as you said, customer success. It's just the words the other way around. It's customers being successful. A successful customer is a customer who got the value out of the product that they purchased. Mm-hmm. Right? That's right. That's my definition of customer success, is a customer who got what they wanted or needed, got the outcomes they were expecting. I don't tend to use outcomes when I'm talking to the customer. It's perfectly okay when we're discussing it conceptually here, but I don't think we really need to use the word outcomes that much when we're talking to the customer. We can talk about goals, objectives, targets, deadlines, milestones. What is it you need to do? All of these things. That's what customer success is the customer being successful. They got what they wanted or needed. And
that's fantastic. I saw what you did there. You took the customer's point of view, and I think that's what we should all be doing, right?
Right. Such a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it, but you're spot on. That is exactly what I did. And here's the thing, right? The next word in customer success manager is manager. Yeah. Okay. So customer success management, the job that we do, it's the management of the process of helping customers be successful. So can you be successful without a customer success manager? Yes. What's the point of a customer success manager? Well, they know the process of success such that they lubricate that process. Yeah. They make it quicker, more efficient, and better. So you can get more success more quickly at less cost if you've got a CSM than if you don't.
Yeah, it's that delta. And the delta should be strong and compelling enough that the customers say, yes, we need to work with you. We really feel without you, it'll be much more difficult.
Either we wouldn't have got where we were, or if we had, it would have taken us longer, or cost more, or both.
Yeah, customers often can get there. It'll just take a lot longer, I think, and be more of a struggle.
And of course, this is why the customer success manager is employed, but it's because we have different expertise. The customer, in theory at least, will always know their own industry and their own organization better than we do.
That's right.
Okay? Yeah. And maybe there's a product specialist out there who knows more about our products than we do. Mm-hmm. And that's fine too. But neither of them know the process of generating success.
Yeah, I was in a voice of the customer kind of roundtable one time, and a customer took a little bit of offense when our leadership was saying to them, customer success is going to work with you, and we're going to have senior advisors who are going to give you kind of a really good knowledge around the domain, your domain, your industry. And someone said, you know what, I don't expect that from you. That's why would I ever expect that from you guys? And I had to kind of weigh in and just layer on a little bit of a qualifier, which is to say the expertise we're going to be offering is about how our solution addresses challenges in your industry. And then, if you kind of qualify that, but people go, oh, okay, that's what you mean. You're not going to be coming with some financial kind of guru from the World Bank. You're actually going to be bring someone in who understands how your solution can help us achieve financial results that we expect through your solution.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. It is at best mildly offensive to have a meeting with a customer where you're going to explain to them how they ought to be running their business.
I think that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, be respectful, right?
Yeah, mildly offensive at best, and it's not going to win you favors with anybody but the most emotionally mature, of which I do not include myself. So were a customer success manager from a product that I purchased to come to me with that, I would struggle to rise above it and continue listening. Yeah. So, for what that's worth, not that my levels of maturity have got anything to do with anything else. I think we should move on at this point. So why Peter then? Why are customer success managers only in existence, it seems, in certain pockets of of business and not elsewhere? Why aren't they everywhere?
I think everyone, not everyone, but most people understand now. It really was born with SaaS, software as a service, because the compelling business justification for it is that customers can disappear or flee if they don't feel they're getting value from it. And so there's a need to have people in place after the sale to ensure customers getting value. I mean, that's the basic equation. And it started there. We do need to acknowledge that. And however, I think it's moving really rapidly, far beyond, not just startups, but it's really taken off in the enterprise space too, but beyond even SaaS. There's customer success beyond SaaS now. And I think this is all a good thing. I think it means that our economies are moving more to the subscription model. And as a consumer, as a customer myself, I love that. I mean, I can make my own choices. I have the control. I feel I have more control. I think that's why we're seeing it definitely it's bigger than a SaaS story now. Customer success.
Right. So I think it's safe to say, Peter, that you and I agree that to answer the question, what does a customer success manager do? The 2-word answer, reduce churn, is not sufficient anymore.
Not enough at all. I would go so far as to say I think it's become, or should be evolving, and it has evolved into a story more about business transformation. I know that's kind of a lofty, aspirational kind of term, but I think it's actually what senior executives want with their businesses, is to transform them to be much more efficient, much better kind of use of their capital and their people, and drive better, higher profits without increasing the expense. And so I think to make sure that happens, you have to revisit or look at all your processes, and customer success is perfectly positioned to help companies do that. Through their solutions, but also through their guidance on how to look at the change that needs to happen for them to actually achieve their goals. So, makes sense?
It does make sense. And I tell you what, I think here is that the difference is that one, we're focusing on the real end result, and the other one we're focusing on the, if you like, the kickback, the knock-on benefits to our own company. But if you actually go back and focus on what we said originally about our definition of customer success management, we didn't say the definition of customer success is reduced churn.
Right.
We said the definition of customer success was making customers successful.
Yeah.
In so doing, if we happen to have a SaaS model, we will hopefully see a reduction in churn.
Yeah.
But you don't have to have a SaaS model to want your customers to be successful, because customers who make outright capital purchases, well, you'd still like them to come back and make more outright capital purchases, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even if you didn't, you'd quite like them to go onto social media and rave about your product so that others make capital purchases too.
Yeah, you just made a good comment there. And I think the metric of reducing churn, or that goal of reducing churn, is actually a lagging indicator. And it's not, you cannot 100% conclude that it's because of customer success. There are other factors that should be attributed to often that are
right,
that cause that good outcome.
I absolutely agree. So, okay. So look, having, I think, kind of defined the purpose of customer success management and seen that it's not just about SaaS and churn reduction. It's a much bigger, more philosophical thing. The concept is it's focusing on the customer, and it's transitioning them from where they are now to where they want or need to be, with the least amount of time, the least amount of cost, and the least amount of fuss, using the best practices that we know because we are customer success managers. Yes, we've got to understand the industry of the customer. Yes, we've got to understand our products, but yes, we've also got to be experts in the process of customer success itself. Mm-hmm. So let's move forward then. So I'd like to talk, Peter, if you're willing, about some of the core aspects of the customer success role, which I think really gets to the well, what do they do then? Because so far we kind of said what should the result be, but all right, what do we do? And of course, as you know, Peter, because you've read the book and very kindly actually complimented me on it, is that I developed a framework, which is what I believe customer success managers should do. Yeah. And it's got 7 phases. It's the practical CSM framework. If you haven't come across it before, it's got 7 phases in it, research, commitment, onboarding, adoption planning, adoption implementation, value realization, and engagement evaluation. And that, to me, that's what customer success managers should do. That is what the customer success function does. It does those 7 things. Well, okay, fine, but what does all of that mean? Let's, pick it apart, and feel free also.
I think you need a framework.
I agree with all of that.
I was just looking over there. I can see the book at the bottom of the bookshelf there. If people haven't looked at it, seriously, this is not going to be a commercial promo, but I recommend it. I highly recommend it. I actually wrote a little blurb at the front that's part of the front of the book, but it's authentic 100%. I read the whole thing. I just think it's fantastic. It's probably the best customer success book I've read in terms of really getting into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to be successful, of establishing a practice such as this, and instrumenting it and systematizing it so that customers in the end benefit from it. And I think, as you're saying, it involves a framework. Because if you're at a dinner party trying to tell people what you do for a living in customer success, if they're interested enough, they're going to ask follow-on questions. Okay, exactly what does that mean? What do your people do with a customer? Imagine I'm a customer. What am I going to see from you? And so, of course, then you have, you're going to be onboarded. So what does that mean? You can bring me onto the solution, introduce me to the solution, maybe give some basic education about it so I can start using it. That kind of stuff is like an element of the framework, right? But there's stuff up front you would need to do if you're a CSM. Right. You got to learn about the customer, right?
Yeah. So in my framework, I describe 2 preparation phases. Mm-hmm. So this is before we do the things that are the things that are the critical things to be done. We've got to do some other things that are critical in order to be able to do the critical things. Yes. Okay. Which is very poorly explained, and I do apologize, but basically that's research into the customer to understand where are they now, what are their strengths and weaknesses compared to their competitors, what are they trying to achieve, who are the stakeholders, what's their skin in the game, what's their opinions about all of this, where are they now in the process of implementing and getting value out of this, where have the frustrations been so far, what's gone well, what hasn't, what are the limitations in terms of of resources and assets and people and so on. We've got to understand the customer, because if you don't know that when you go to the customer, you're not going there ready to be useful. You're going there expecting the customer to get you ready to be useful. And let's be honest, it's not their job.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's not their job. In many cases, well, probably all cases, they've already given information to your company anyways, and they feel like all of a sudden, if you don't
here
know,
we go again, right? Rolling their eyes, going, okay, right. Let me play the part of what you should be doing yourself, and I'm going to upskill you on me.
Yeah, it just sets up the relationship in a bad state immediately, right out of the gate. So don't do that. Do the research.
And then the other area, which I believe is the pre-work, the other sort of stuff before you get into the really the hot stuff, is I define this as the commitment phase, and this is the all important people management part, where you get to meet, formulate relationships, start to build some kind of trust relationship and some personal relationship with the stakeholders, start to understand them, start to validate the information that you've had from account managers and salespeople and elsewhere that may or may not be accurate, may have been accurate before and isn't now, may never have been accurate. Start to get the viewpoints and the opinions of the stakeholders that you will be working with, and start to agree, how are you going to work with them? What are you going to work on? What should the end result be? By when should you get that? How are you going to collaborate together? What tools are you going to use? How often are you going to meet? How are you going to meet? All of these sorts of things. That is it's very, it's a bit dull in a sense, but it's so critical to the success of a project, is this meeting the people, agreeing the terms bit. I call that commitment.
Yeah, it's basically collecting a bunch of data and filling out a picture that helps you become a better partner for your customer. That's ultimately what you want. You want to really be a credible resource for them going forward, because they're investing a lot of money typically in your solution, and they have high expectations, right? So they have high expectations of the solution, but also of the people that we're going to be dealing with. And so you want to present the best face, do a really good job of what you just described, Rick, all those data points, element of information are expected.
And then that brings us to the sort of the three core areas that I think customer success is most known for, which is onboarding, adoption, and value realization. Yeah. And that really, those three things, they're at the heart of customer success, aren't they, really, Peter?
Yeah, they're categories. They're indispensable. You have to have those things. Yeah. Because ultimately, that's what
from yourself on onboarding.
I'm sorry, question?
My apologies. We talked together. I was just asking if you had any specific thoughts you wanted to share on onboarding. I mean, I describe it as ensuring mission clarity. And if you look at the analogy of getting on an aircraft, right, that aircraft legally cannot take off whilst there's somebody who is not correctly onboarded. You've got to be in your seat with the tray stored, the footrest back, your seatbelt has to be on, and your bag needs to be in the locker, and the locker needs to be closed. And until everybody is in that position, you cannot take off. That is onboarding. Yeah. And a couple of points about this that I think are really interesting, right? Is like, first of all, notice that the extremely efficient staff who are onboarding a plane, their job is to get that onboarding done as quickly as possible. And the reason why is because the quicker onboarding is done, the quicker you get to the value bit, which is nothing to do with sitting on the runway. There is no value in sitting on the runway. It costs money. And this is identical for our customer. Currently, it's just an expense. Whilst you're in the onboarding phase, no value is being created. So same thing. We want to get through onboarding quickly. That's my first point. The second point on onboarding that I think is also really interesting, again, using the aeroplane analogy, Peter, who does the onboarding in the plane?
Who does the onboarding in the plane? Is the flight attendant making sure all the...
Do they?
The individual sitting in the seat?
Do they, for example, does your air steward or stewardess come down the steps, pick you up, carry you up the steps, and put you into your chair?
I was going to say the customer does themselves the onboarding because they follow the rules. Right? They follow the directions that are prescribed to them as best they can, and they have trust that means that they're doing all the right things
They are there to check and to help. Yeah, and this again, I think, is analogous to the customer success manager. They are the experts. They know the process. They guide, they help, they check, but they're not. It's not their journey. They're not going to Los Angeles or Kuala Lumpur, right? It's not their journey. They are there to help us on our journey. And that's the same with the customer success manager. So I think that analogy really is a really strong one. We can't do all the heavy lifting, and if it's me, it would be heavy lifting. And that's the same for the air host or hostess, and same for ourselves as CSS. We can't do it all, but what we can do is we can make it as efficient as possible by providing the right advice and guidance, help, and assistance.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So what about the adoption? I divide it into planning and implementation because I see planning as being more change management focused, i.e. what do we need to do to make sure we've got a really strong communication, training, support, reward and remuneration plan in place to make it so that people will do what they need to do. And then I see the implementation of that plan as being more like a project management piece where we're using quite different sort of tools and ways of working to make sure people do what they're meant to do and do it on time and to the right quality and so on.
I see the adoption planning phase is a really important skill to have there is communication and almost like storytelling in a way. You have to kind of paint a picture for the customer of why it's important for them to engage really heavily with you in the next period around this kind of framework of driving our activities, our collective activities together forward, because at the end there's this destination called Kuala Lumpur. It's really beautiful, it's exotic, it's tropical, and you're going to love it, but to get there you have to go through all these steps, and I'm going to be there with you to help you along the way, answer any questions and give you kind of proactive kind of clues about what's going to come next. and so that you have the best experience possible. And I think that whole planning piece, you're right. The unsexy word is change management, but that's exactly what it is. You're planning for all the changes that are going to happen on their side, and you're going to. And the earlier they know about these things, the better they're going to. The more successful they'll be, and the happier they'll be through that experience. You don't want them tripping up as they go along. Oh, you didn't tell me I have to change this particular process, or I had to skill up these people. Now that delays the project by 3 to 4 months, and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, I totally agree. The adoption planning piece is so critical to make sure it goes well.
Yeah, and then obviously followed by implementation, which is, well, now we've got the plan. The plan needs to be followed, and it needs to be followed well. So again, we need that management piece. In this case, it's project management, which is, it's a task, has a beginning and an end, it has a bunch of activities involved. Therefore, it's a project. Therefore, it needs to be managed. Therefore, somebody needs to do that. And of course, there may be an official project manager, and we're working with them for larger implementations. But for smaller implementations, guess who's, it's Muggins, right? It's us. We're the ones who have to make sure that everything happens. So that doesn't mean necessarily that we have to be project management qualified and certified. Not that it hurts, by the way. Certainly a good thing to do, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does help, because that is I would call that part of the journey. It can be a slog because it's sometimes it's hard to see if you're making progress, and that's why it's important to stay on plan. And the communications have to be crystal clear, and everyone needs to understand where they're at and what the blockers are, or how to kind of accelerate it. And so it's very key for the CSM to be a really good coach.
I think so. Yes, great word. Yeah, really good coach. So there's two aspects to this adoption. The planning is about knowing what needs to be done. Yeah. The implementation is about making sure it gets done. Yeah, they are. And arguably, as a CS team grows, you may find that you want to start specializing certain team members into one or other of those roles, because they are naturally better either at the planning side or at the implementation side.
Yeah, this is really good. I think things for CSMs to think about as they're looking at their customers and working with them. How can I, now that I'm getting to know the customers' teams, how can I offer up my recommendations? Okay, these people over here, I believe you should probably look at them to be the ones who kind of take more of a prominent role in this piece here. Just recommendation, because I'm witnessing kind of their behaviors as kind of really strong skills in this area around project management. Maybe it'd be better to bring them into the kind of core piece of the next phase.
Yeah, so and it could be the case, I guess, Peter, where we've got 50 team members or 40 team members or 30 team. We can't necessarily afford to send them all through a full project management certification course. That's right. But we could afford to send 2 or 3 through the change management course and 2 or 3 others through the project management course. And then you've got the specialists to call upon with the more complex adoption planning and implementation requirements as and when those come up, right? Yeah.
Well,
we've got to move on if it's okay with you, Peter. So again, just following my framework, obviously, which is what we're doing, not necessarily have to do it in this order or in this way. There is an order to it, but having got through adoption and implementation, where we should be at this point is at what I describe as value realization, which means that the customer is now positioned to be getting value out of whatever it is they've purchased from us. They're now using it. And to me, everything that marketing does, selling does, product development does, customer success does, customer support does, everything that we do and everything the customer does leads up to this moment. Value realization, that is the start gate for the customer to start getting an ROI. Any thoughts on value realization, how important it is?
Statement. I love it, because that's exactly when the customer feels like, okay, now we're starting. And everyone worked, and you might think up to that point, wow, we've been going at this for a year.
Yeah, we're done now.
But that's not the way a customer sees it. They see the start point as now.
Great point.
Getting the value, and I think the value moment. It's good for outsiders to say, okay, now prove it. You say you're starting to realize value, but we need more than anecdotal statements. Like if I'm a company, I'm looking for references for your solution. I would love for you to show me other customers, but show me the empirical proof. Right. of that, and not just their statements that they're getting value. So I want to see this improvement. So that's the onus now, is at this moment, you got to start proving it through the data. Right?
Two really critical points. So I absolutely could not agree more. Measuring, analyzing, reporting are so critical to value realization, because this is what enables us to know whether it's really happening or not. So that the customer themselves, the stakeholder who's responsible for turning this project into some value, can report back to the powers that be to say, yes, I can say for sure, because I've seen the measurements, I've analyzed the measurements, and here's the report to prove it. And by the way, therefore, my recommendation is to renew or to purchase more, or whatever the situation is. So from both our own perspective and customers' perspective, it's really important to measure, analyze, and report. And I think there's another aspect to value realization which we mustn't forget, which is that it does not happen all in one go. It happens over the long term. So whereas up to now we've been talking about things like gaining their commitment and doing research and onboarding and adoption, well, this might have happened over a number of days, weeks, and months, but value realization happens over years or even decades.
That's right.
And it's not necessarily in year 2 going to look the same as what it did, was what we thought it would,
because their business changes, right? So
so I think that adapting and pivoting and being flexible is another part of that value realization part that goes into the customer success role, helping the customer to change with changing circumstances over time.
As you're talking, I'm thinking customer success management is a role that's not for the faint of heart. It really requires people to be kind of nimble in the way they think. They have to be have to be really open-minded, that understanding in the world of cloud, applications are going to change all the time. So your applications are changing, the customer's business is evolving too, because of their markets and their teams. So you cannot think in a kind of a rigid way. Although you have to be able to be good at managing projects, you also have to be open to think, okay, this will change too down the road, and I have to be willing and able to kind of, as you said, Rick, pivot to these things. 100%.
All right, so I think we've reached our time limit. Really, we've gone a couple minutes past the 1:45, so we've got about sort of 12 minutes left for questions. So I see we've got a few people saying hello in the chat, and that's great. If you have any questions, I've had a few come in on the Q&A page as well, which I can read out. So let me read out one of those, and then we'll see if anyone's got any questions. So in the chat window, feel free to add your questions. I've got a couple from my Q&A panel as well. So the first question I've got here is from Marianne. Marianne asks, how do we calculate the level of complexity of our products? Is there an industry standard way of doing this? Any thoughts on that, Peter?
I don't think there's an industry standard. I think that's probably not really possible. There's just too much variety and too much change, difference in size and the complexity. And it's because some products are kind of pretty straightforward. This is what it does. This is what it's going to promise to accomplish for you. But then other products, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of its features and functions, and that's intentional, because they want to address a larger kind of market. So they offer a broad portfolio of features to enable multiple kind of scenarios to exist or to be accomplished. So the complexity comes in for those reasons, and then you also have to think about customers are all different too, and depending on their industry and their maturity and their specific business reasons, they might need to customize a lot of this stuff too, and their processes, and so the complexity comes in really from what the customer's intention is to do, what goal are they trying to accomplish, but also then how sophisticated they are able to leverage the solution. Some can take it more out of the box, I would say.
I think it's a maturity thing, isn't it? So some customers may be very experienced in doing this. For them, it's business as usual. They do it all the time. Change is normal for them. For others, they might be deer in the headlines, right?
That's right. Yeah,
need a lot more help.
I
noticed here, just because of time, I'm going to move us on. And forgive me, I'm going to try and pronounce your name correctly. Is it Mika? Has asked a question. So when you join an organization where customer success is not already there, where do you start in implementing customer success? Is it onboarding? Is it adoption? Is it focusing on existing clients, or do you start with the new ones? Do you build relationships? Do you do research? What do you do? I can't do it all at once.
Well, you need to start.
Let me have a go and see, and please come in, Peter. Yeah. I think actually step number one is actually to step back and think about the customer journey post sales. So that's the first thing I would do. Is I would say, okay, so once they've made the sales decision, what happens? I want to know the whole route through, everything that happens from the decision, yes, I will buy it, through to ultimately, oh my goodness, that was wonderful. I'm going to give you lots of references because I'm getting lots of value from it. And I want to know what happened, everything that happens in between. And then I'm going to look at that customer journey. And I'm going to look at the touch points where we might or might not actually already be touching them, and the touch points where we could be touching them, and be saying, right, where could we add value in this? Where are the problems or the challenges that my customer faces, and which are the worst problems, which are the biggest challenges? And I would suggest that that is then where you would then focus your resources, is on helping the customer overcome the biggest hurdles that they currently have.
Build those into a program. Yeah, agreed. The customer journey always start there. Yeah, for sure.
Tom has asked a fantastic question, one that I dearly love. Tom is saying, can you repeat the title of the customer success management book referenced earlier? Yes, I certainly can. Practical Customer Success Management. Practical Customer Success Management, a best practice framework for the rapid generation of customer success in all good bookshops. Hey, there it is. Published by Routledge and Taylor and Francis, but you can get it from Amazon or wherever you want. Thank you for that question. We do have a few more minutes, so if you have any more questions, please do ask. And again, let me just check back on the Q&A tool. Right, so this is Tyler. At what point does it make sense to think about automation and tech touch rather than using a high or medium touch with real CSMs?
The quick answer is once you've had success already with your having established a practice, you've got customers, you're working with customer success practice, you've got proof of driving some value, and your process is repeatable and it's been documented, and you're actually showing some results. And then your senior leadership team says, oh, you guys are great. I want you to touch more customers. That's the moment, I think, when you start exploring. Maybe you should have already explored, but you have to start establishing, kind of an additional kind of layers of touch to, work on different segments of the customer community. Basically,
yeah, I mean, one of the problems. So we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, Peter? I think one of the things that we need to acknowledge is that if you're going to develop like automated processes, then you kind of reverse the way that the money flows. So with a service that you have a human being deliver, like a customer success manager, it's going to cost you more in the long term, but actually in the short term, it's relatively inexpensive. It's just an ongoing salary cost. Yeah. As opposed to automation. So automation is the other way around. It's very front-end loaded in terms of the cost. You've got all of the cost of all of the developers doing all of the development, and then you slowly recoup that cost over the months and years that you use that automation, because you don't need to be paying the salaries of the CSM to be doing those tasks. Doesn't mean you don't need the CSMs, by the way. They could be doing other stuff, but that's the point of it. So here's the thing, right, is that you only get that ROI when you are at the level of maturity where you don't have to keep blasting well going back and redoing your development.
That's right.
And you can't be at that level of maturity on day one. So in fact, for most organizations, it does not make sense to do automation straight away. You're better off learning your mistakes on your CSMs, getting your customer success best practice really well defined and documented so that you can pass a really clear, precise and accurate process to the developers and say, we want one of those and we know it works. So that would be my thing on that. Let's just see. Oh, Gary Hamblin has come in with a question. What type of personality is most suitable to be a CSM? Any thoughts on that one, Peter?
Great question. I would say someone who we use the word empathy a lot in customer success, and I think it's not meant to say or imply that you have to be empathetic to the point where you do anything whatever the customer asks for. It's more about you want to have empathy for their point of view and what their needs are. And then you would kind of be able to figure out and distill that kind of knowledge to put it in place, or help to put in place and improve a process to make their lives better, to make their goals more easily achieved and faster. So that's empathy in my mind. You have to kind of have a scientific mind, balanced against that kind of emotion.
It's a funny old role, isn't it, Peter? It's like in the middle of everything, jack of all trades, probably master of nothing, or even master of everything. So yeah, actually, it does require a certain amount of right and left brain balance, I think. Yeah, so I think somebody who's very academic, but not very real world and pragmatic, it's not going to work. But also somebody who is not able to think creatively out of the box and who is not able to analyze data and come up with meaning actually will struggle as well, however good they are at, say, forming relationships. Yeah. So there's actually it's a good question you're asking, and I would say there's quite a lot of aspects to that.
Yeah, it's a great conversation.
So good question. Okay, couple of other questions. There's one here, right? I'm just going to check. There's a Mercedes has asked, I work at a small firm. I manage 200 clients and I'm the only CSM. Where do you recommend I focus on building a new CSM system? Now, hopefully, because was it Mika asked a similar question, I'm hoping that kind of covered it, Mercedes. So if it didn't, please tell us what else you would like. And I'm going to move to another question whilst you're thinking about that. And then that will probably lead us up to the end of the time. But this one came in, it's sort of a private question, so you probably can't see it in the chat window. But it says, this is from Jim. It says, hi, great session. Thank you. It then says, do you find or have you ever thought of customer alignment through an OGSM, which is defining objectives, goals, strategies, and measures?
Yeah, I think that's how we've designed ours. We don't call it with that. I'll call it an acronym with those letters. We call it something else, but it's exactly that. You set the objectives, what are the goals, and what are the strategies that are going to help you kind of achieve those goals, and then you put in place, and this is so critical, the measures along the way. I mean, if you're missing that piece, you're never going to be able to prove it, right? So I like that. It's a good question. And I think without this, let's call it a framework, I think you'll never be successful in customer success.
Tools are so helpful. So I don't. Also, same as Peter, I reflect what he said. I also don't use that particular model. I use the OMG business motivation model. So that looks at the concept of starting at the top with your vision and mission, and then from there you develop your corporate goals, for which you need strategies, and then from that you divide that into a set of SMART objectives for which you develop tactics. So that's the model that I use, but it is not dissimilar in basic context and why and when I use it.
I think that's
so final little bit. Mercedes has come back, and Mercedes has said, I would also like any advice on the renewal process. So again, just to remember that her original question was around, coming in, managing 200 clients where you're the only CSM. Where do you focus on building a new CSM system, with a particular now sort of focus here on the renewal process? Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, it's difficult to give direct advice here, but we'll do our best.
I'll keep it really quick. There's no easy answer for that. I think ultimately the answer is, great renewals happen when the customer's successful and in achieving their goals. And it's been proven many times, and we prove it all the time, is that the more successful we are at guiding them forward, the propensity to renew rises a lot. And so if you're at a point with the customer where they're ready to renew and they haven't felt that they're getting value, that's a huge struggle. And in many cases, customers feel like they're forced into renewal through discounting and all that kind of stuff. And that's not going to be an enduring relationship, I don't think. So I think you can't escape this framework of success to lead toward.
And where you've got 200 customers, it becomes, if anything, more important, because you just don't have the luxury of time to be, having nice, hour and a half long, coffee meetings with your customers. You've got 200 of them. You can't touch any one of them that often. I think that you need super clarity around what success means for each of those customers. So I think you need to be, if you don't know now, which you may or may not do, then you need to be asking them. So my first step would be, I'd be thinking about what kind of tool, like a simple form, can I develop? And then what I'm going to do is, in the new year, I'm going to go out, reach out to all my customers. Well, first of all, I'm going to fill it out as best I believe. And some I'm going to be more sure and some I'm going to be less. So I'm going to rate myself as to how much I believe this is accurate, but I'm going to basically state this is what I believe success looks like for this customer, and then I'm going to go to all of those customers. I'm going to validate it.
That's perfect.
I think that would be my start point, and then that is right. First of all, it's a focus on them, not you. You're going to talk about them. You're not going to talk about yourself. Customers like that. Secondly, it gives you a starting point to then say, okay, so how far away are you from here? How do you know? How do you measure it? And how could we measure it if you're not measuring it? And let's agree, what do we need to do to get you from where you are now to where you need to be? Yeah. And then you build a success plan with each customer. And of course, for yourself with 200 customers, what you'd be looking at is, you can't do all 200 customers today. You're going to need to break this into, which ones should we focus on in Q1? And then break that into, which ones are the most critical ones to do in January? And then you're going to work with, maybe out of your 200, maybe you're going to work with 10 or 15 of those, in January to build a success plan with. And I think that's the kind of approach that I would take.
Great.
Without knowing the details, so that with the proviso that might be completely wrong for reasons I don't know about as well. Sure. Okay. So thank you all very much indeed. I think we've gone 2 minutes past the hour. Not that really matters, but I think we're done. I don't see any more questions coming in anyway, so that's perfect. So just to say to everyone who's joined us today, thank you. It's great to have you with us. Please do subscribe at practicalcsm.com, and that way, if you subscribe to the newsletter, we can let you know. We've got a planning session next week. I think you said, Peter, we're going to come up with some ideas as to what the topics will be. As I said, email myself, rick.adams@practicalcsm.com.
Yeah, we're happy to hear.
Peter, what's your email address for them to email you?
Peter.armaly, ARMALY, @oracle.com.
Okay, cool. And with any ideas as to any future topics you'd like us to cover. And I think the other thing that we wanted to say was, it's been a really tough year for so many of us, personally for so many, professionally for so many, perhaps both for a lot of you. We feel your pain. If you've experienced difficulties this year, our hearts go out to you, both Peter and I. And we want to both say, I think, that we're glad 2020 is pretty much over. We look forward, with a lot of positivism towards 2021, and we wish every one of you here and your friends and family, a healthy, wealthy, and prosperous 2021.
Be safe, be well, everybody. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.